Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this podcast, you will discover interviews with procurement and technical experts, business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. These experts will help you to develop and grow, accelerate your career, improve your business, save money, and buy smart. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. My next guest founded, scaled and sold his landscaping business, Peachtree Inc, for an incredible $10 million. As a serial entrepreneur, he then decided not to sit back and relax, but to apply his business acumen and drive to co-found a new online business to help unite homeowner and lawn mowing service providers through an app called GreenPal. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to Bryan Clayton from Tennessee to learn how he bootstrapped and scaled his first business and then pivoted to learn new skills and achieved further success by going online. I'm particularly excited to talk to Bryan, as I'm proud to say my son is planning to become self-employed and embark on his own entrepreneurial journey, offering gardening and tree surgery services. So without any further delay, I welcome Bryan onto the podcast. Hi, Bryan.
Dave, great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolute pleasure. So let's start at the beginning. Can you walk us down your path, excuse the pun, that led to you becoming such a successful landscaping entrepreneur? Did you intentionally set out with this destination in mind?
I think it intentionally was set forth by my father on a hot summer day. He got tired of watching me sit around playing Nintendo. Back in those days, it was Super Mario Kart. And he said, and he busts in my room one day. He said, "Get off your butt. Guess what? I got a gig for you to do. You're going to go mow the neighbor's yard." And I guess fortunately for me, I wasn't living in a democratic household. This was a direct order, and he made me go mow the neighbor's yard. He actually helped me and showed me how to start the mower and how to actually do the basics. And I made $20 for an hour's worth of work. And back in 1995 was a lot of money. And I was hooked. I was hooked on entrepreneurship from that moment going forward. I thought, this is incredible. You know, why doesn't everybody do this? I don't understand. Like, this is so easy. Actually, the work was hard, but I was making, good money. And I remember I passed out a bunch of door flyers all over the neighborhood and got my first 10 or 20 customers that first summer. And I never looked back. I never looked back on getting a job or any other way of life other than business ownership. And little by little, grew that little lawn mowing business all through high school and all through college and went to business school. And when I graduated business school, I made a business plan. And then over a 15-year period of time, built one of the larger landscaping companies in the southeastern United States and got it over 150 employees, over 10 million in revenue. And in 2013, sold that business. So really learned a lot about business ownership and entrepreneurship the hard way with the lawn mowing business, but it was a great path for me.
Yeah, it's interesting you saying it's the extent that you scale that business. And certainly 150 employees is quite incredible for any business, let's say. But starting out as a solopreneur, that can be extremely tough. I'm certainly seeing that with my son as an example. And to scale beyond being self-employed or perhaps having just a few co-workers join you, that's quite a difficult thing to try and achieve. So can you explain how you went about the scaling journey to get to the 150 employees and multiple vehicles? You had a lot of capital assets. So how did you work your way up through that? How did you get that message out to people and get those people on board?
It definitely is a challenge. It is a trap that a lot of new founders, new entrepreneurs fall into. Nobody teaches us how to build a business. Nobody teaches us small business. And the other thing nobody ever teaches us is that there's a big difference between being self-employed and owning a business. And there's like a long, I guess you could say, gap between those two that you kind of have to traverse through. And for me, looking back, building my first business, the landscaping company, now my second business, GreenPal, the one thing that makes sense is just really focusing one level at a time, really just looking at what level of the game I'm at and doing everything you can to get through that level. And so the first level in the lawn mowing business was, I just need 100 customers. I need to get 100 customers every week. I can mow 100 myself. And then after that, I'll figure out the rest. And so I got through that. And then level 2 was, well, now I'd like to do 200 customers. Well, I need a hired employee. Well, what can I afford to pay them? What can I afford to, how do I train them? Where do I find them? How do I keep them? And then you start to look, you start to unlock a second level of the game, which is everything that goes into duplication, systems, processes, routines, training, all these things. And it's a lot harder than you think. And so doing that, getting through that level, maybe your first employee. And then the third level is maybe, okay, well, how do I get 5 people? And then you start to really understand that, at least I learned this the hard way was that I was in the business of selling hours. I was selling labor hours, and I knew I had to organize it as such to where I could train people to deliver the service at an efficient time and sell that labor hour at a profit for what it cost me to do it for. And I did it the wrong way and lost money, for a long time until I figured out how to do it the right way. But that might be level 3. And the problem is that, at level 1 and level 2, we're worried about Bowser when Bowser doesn't matter. Like, just get through that level of the game. And that's how I did it. How I did it with the first business, and got it all the way up to 150 people. And as you get to levels 8, 9, and 10, it's a lot more challenging. It's a lot more complex. But you don't need to worry about things like branding and culture and who's going to be my head of HR. Well, you just need to get your first 100K a year in revenue.
Yeah. Okay. So it's really challenging because you're moving from being an active participant in the business in some respects to being somebody who has to step back away from doing the hands-on stuff and suddenly have to look at all these awkward things called people. And machines are pretty easy to get on with, but people can be challenging, especially when they're representing your business and your reputation. And that's where you mentioned the HR manager, that suddenly becomes you. And I guess that must be quite a difficult thing. It depends if you're not a people person, you're a physical, hands-on kind of guy, to sort of change your direction to be this people-y orientated person now, scheduling and managing and handling paperwork. That must have been pretty tough.
Yeah, you're doing 3 things at the same time when you're starting a business. And Michael Gerber talks about this in his book, The E-Myth. You're working in the business. So you're, for in my case, mowing yards. And then the second thing you're doing is you're working on the business, which is, okay, I need to really figure out the unit economics of this business. I need to put pen to pad. I need to figure out how to make it run more efficient. I need to figure out how to get another employee. I need to figure out how to train them faster, all of these processes. And then the third thing that's not in Michael Gerber's book that I've kind of stumbled upon is you're working on yourself. So I wasn't a natural born leader. I actually kind of stink at leadership. But I got to learn how to be a decent leader. I got to learn how to be a decent manager. I got to learn how to be a decent bookkeeper. I got to learn how to read a financial statement. So I got to learn the basis of accounting. I got to learn how to market this business. So I need to be a decent copywriter, marketer, all of these and the list goes on. There's probably 20 other basic things that you need to learn. So you're working in the business, just holding it together, working on the business, the systems, processes, routines, and then working on yourself. How am I going to level up to execute on this stuff? And it's a 7-day-a-week thing. In the early days, it might be Monday through Fridays in the business. Saturday is on it. Sunday is on yourself. As time goes on, maybe you can balance those things out a little bit better.
Yeah. So one interesting thing I'm quite keen to understand is when you've got people representing your business, particularly in the area there where you're working, how did you keep tabs on the level of customer satisfaction that was happening there? Because you're never remote, you're not hands-on, you're not seeing your own guys doing this work. So how did you gauge that? How did you evaluate that?
It's challenging because in the early days, you don't have the processes, the systems. You're kind of just playing whack-a-mole and just trying to, make sure that everything's getting done well. As time goes on, you develop processes around executing the service to meet the standard. Michael Gerber talks a lot about this in the E-Myth, actually. This is how we do it here. This is why we do it this way. And this is how we grade the results. This is how we come back and check up on it. This is how we gauge customer satisfaction. And each one of those things is a little miniature process, little routine where the thing just hums and it runs like a flywheel. And for me, it was very much hand-to-hand combat, driving around, looking at jobs that my company was doing and making sure my customers all had my cell phone number, all could reach me 7 days a week to let me know when they were upset. And then trying to figure out, okay, where did things break down? And how do I fix the process, fix the system? And we still do this today with GreenPal. GreenPal is an app that we run that hundreds of thousands of people are using it to get their grass cut at all times. and we at scale now have to figure out how do we prevent things from going wrong. And one thing that we do is we ask why 5 times. Okay, so why is Mrs. Smith upset? Well, because we missed her on last week and we didn't get her yard mowed. Well, why didn't we get her yard mowed? Well, her day's Thursday and it rained Thursday. Well, why didn't we know it was going to rain Thursday? And why didn't we reschedule it ahead of time? Well, because nobody's looking at that. Well, okay, somebody needs to be looking at the schedule every evening and rescheduling things based on weather forecasts. And so, like, that's just one little simple example of going through why 5 times. Every time something goes wrong, you do that over and over again, you get a good process that delivers a consistent result.
Yeah. What I love here is you said 2 key things for me is that you have to have the willingness to learn new things. That came through very strongly. And a lot of people don't want to take on new things. They don't like the change, should we say. And then it's the hands-on approach to your customers, certainly in the first business, where you would actively go and engage with customers. And I think that's very critical. Just because you got 150 people working beneath you, that didn't stop you engaging directly with the people that you were serving. So I think that's quite a critical thing to point out. But then you decided to sell that business. Why did you decide to sell when it's so successful? And how did you go about selling it?
Yeah, I didn't plan on selling the company, but one thing I stumbled upon was part of, what we're talking about is like you grow with the business and the business requires all of these things of you and you start to take on new challenges and you evolve and the business is kind of like your vehicle almost through life in a way. And you kind of get this satisfaction from it where you are growing alongside the business. That was something that I didn't know I was benefiting from. I didn't know I was enjoying until it plateaued. And it wasn't like I had conquered the world or anything, but I had grown a decent sized business in my market, in my industry. It was running well. It was profitable. And then for about 3 years in a row, it kind of almost felt like the same movie over and over again. And I had reached a point of a plateau from a personal standpoint. And it was really unsatisfying to me. And I realized that I wasn't getting what I needed from the business anymore. And so I thought, well, maybe I should sell it, because I'm not getting what I need from it in terms of personal growth anymore. Maybe I should try to sell it. And so from the moment I had the idea to explore an acquisition to the day we got it done was a little over 2 years, because there was a lot of things that I didn't have in place in the business that needed to be in place to get a business of that size acquired. There's a book called Built to Sell, which is really good. And it talks about a lot of these kind of nuts and bolts and block and tackling of getting a business sold. I wish I had that book then and read it. It would have saved me a lot of headache, but it really lays out all the things you got to do. And so a lot of people try to sell their business from a standpoint of, oh, it's just, I'm burnt out and I no longer want this business. It's like, I hate it, or it's not making money, or maybe it is not enough, or I just don't want to do it anymore. That is not the position in which to try to sell your business, because if anybody's going to buy your business, they don't want to buy a bunch of problems. If you're going to sell your business, it's most likely you're going to be in a case where you're in love with it, because you're going to get it to a point where you fall back in love with it. I promise you. And that's what happened with me. When we had to rebuild it from the inside out, a bunch of systems, processes, routines, accounting practices, contracts, all sorts of things. And by the time we got it all rebuilt, I had almost fallen in love with it back again, and I didn't want to sell it. But, I'd already signed a contract, and that's just how it goes.
Okay. So you decided to go on another venture, and no, it wasn't the physical venture. You've now moved into an online platform, if you want to call it anything else, or an app. Now, why on earth an app? You're in the same sort of arena. You're selling, again, to customers, gardening services. But that's such a big change from a physical business to an app. What was the thought behind that? And, how did you find that transition?
Yeah, you really nailed it. So I sold the company and I thought, wow, I got it done. Well, this is great. And I didn't have to work anymore. And it was nice. It was liberating. But after about 6 months, I got bored, really. And it really kind of set in that I needed another company. I needed another project. I needed another mission in life almost. And that my business was the thing that was making my life interesting. And I didn't have it anymore. And it was really a weird feeling. So I thought, well, who's going to, what do I need? What should I do now? And I thought, well, an app should exist for what I just spent 15 years doing. Somebody's going to build it. And I was seeing kind of parallels with Uber and Airbnb and Lyft and other peer-to-peer multi-sided marketplaces that an app was making it run really smooth. And that stuff looks really easy from the outside. And I thought, well, how hard could it be? And somebody's going to do it. It might as well be me. And I recruited 2 co-founders who were also just as naive and had just as big a chip on their shoulder. And we set out to build the Uber for lawn mowing services. And we were quickly confronted with the reality that it's a lot harder than we imagined. And we didn't know what we didn't know. None of us knew how to build software. None of us had ever built a technology product before. And the first thing we did is we paid a development shop to build what we thought GreenPal should be. And then we felt like we should just be able to market that and be off to the races. And that is not how it went. We spent 8-9 months with these guys and launched it like $200,000, and it was a total failure. It just did not have what it needed to deliver on like the minimal experience of push a button, somebody comes and mows your yard. And we were quickly like, we had a gut check where it's like, oh, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to learn how to build software. There's just no way around it. And so my co-founder went to software school. I went to online school, YouTube University, every online tutorial I could get my hands on around coding and front-end engineering. And over a 2 or 3 year period of time, we learned how to build software and rebuilt the whole thing from scratch and began to acquire customers along the way, and then started to build out a little team around us. Took a long time, but it was a transition that we kind of had to go through to get in the game. And looking back, it's kind of as silly as if I wanted to start a restaurant, maybe a 5-star restaurant, but with no chef. I had never cooked anything in my life and I had no recipes. That's what starting a tech company with no tech acumen is kind of like.
Okay. Because you do see these things online saying, oh, everybody should have an app and just come to us and we could do it for a couple $100 and things like that. That sounds pretty crazy to me. And it is then in reality.
Well, it just depends. If you are trying to build a brand new experience product from scratch that does not exist, you're going to have to build it yourself. If you own a dry cleaning service, and you want a way for your customers to be able to order online, there's off-the-shelf pieces of technology you can pay for that. So it kind of depends on the context. If you're wanting to start a brand new app where somebody pushes a button, your dry cleaning gets picked up, they clean it and bring it back to you and bill you for it, you're going to have to learn how to code. And how awesome would that be? Somebody should actually do that.
There we go. We just started a new business.
There you go.
Fantastic. So you've now created in your mind the perfect app, but you've got to get people to become aware of that, both customers and suppliers, the guys who are going to go out there and physically do the work on your behalf. So how did you go about marketing those 2 areas to customers and suppliers?
There's a saying that first-time founders, particularly first-time tech founders, worry about product, and second-time founders worry about distribution. And so what that means is like the first-time guy, like what I was almost 10 years ago now, is just really fixated on, what the app's going to look like and what the screens look like and how it solves the problems and how people are going to interact with it and how they're going to build it. And the second-time person who's been around the block, I guess, is where I'm sitting now. It doesn't even almost understands that none of that matters. Like, how are we going to market it? How are we going to get it into people's hands? What's the innovation around that piece of the equation? Because if you can't figure that out right, the product's dead on arrival. And we were confronted with this. It's like, if you build it, they will not come. And we had we rebuilt the thing like 3 or 4 times, and we still had no customers. We had like an early adopting like handful of 100 people, and we had to like really understand what's the marketing engine at the core of this thing. What is like, we built the DeLorean, but there was no flux capacitor. What's the engine? Like, what's the thing that's going to cause it to travel? And we had to really test every single channel we could and try to figure out if there was like any sort of life in any of them. And the only one we really could get any traction on was just like run of the mill, flat out, like Google organic search. You look for a lawn mowing service in your town, GreenPal pops up as one of the options you can consider. And being good at that and competing at that, is harder than building the whole platform in and of itself. Like writing code and building product and shipping features is hard, but it's easy in comparison to winning at SEO. It's weird. You wouldn't think that to be the case, but it is. And we had to kind of like bet the company on it. And all the things you got to do to be good at organic search, we did, and still do to this day. Over half of the people, there's over 300,000 people using the app, and over half of them come through just a run of the mill looking for a lawn mowing service. This is how they discover our product.
Right. So now it's clear how you went about finding the customers. That makes absolute sense to me. But all these customers are now, I assume, are across the whole of the US because obviously it's an app. But you need to provide or make sure you provide a service. So those suppliers that are going to represent your app are going to go into those locations. They're going to turn up on time. They're going to behave appropriately. They're going to give the right sort of service and care and such. How did you start to find those and engage those? And did they come before the customers, therefore? Because your customer could come from anywhere in the US, I assume.
Yeah, we really tried to figure out a way to roll it out city by city, because a homeowner in Seattle doesn't care how many contractors you have in Wichita, Kansas, et cetera.
Yeah.
So we really rolled it out city by city. So that was the first step. The second thing was just getting a handful of early adopting contractors in every town and then vetting them by hand and understanding if they were up to snuff or not. It was very tedious in the early days. And then we started marketing consumers, get them onto the platform, and then developing the interactions between the two. And then as time goes on, we started doing thousands and thousands of transactions. While in the early days it was very much at scale, we understood, who was doing well and who didn't. And we deplatformed contractors that weren't doing well and promoted the ones that were. As time went on, we developed systematic ways to understand which contractors are good, which ones aren't. And simple things like how often do they show up on the day they're supposed to? We measure that. If they're supposed to show up on Thursday and they show up on Monday, that we calculate a simple factor, what we call a reliability rating. And that is displayed along their pricing. It's a very important rating that tells consumers how often they show up on the day they're supposed to show up, which is a big problem that the platform solves for homeowners, because the thing they really want is they just want to push a button, get the chore done. And they don't want to have to hassle and wrangle the lawn guy, which is the reality on how it happens in the normal sense. And so that's one way we measure who's good and who's not. We also understand who's getting booked for a second, third, and fourth service. And that's a leading indicator for us to understand, is Joe's Lawn Care good enough to where his customers continually book him for the whole season, because we know a certain percentage should. And if it falls below that acceptable percentage, we demote him or we expel him from the platform, because it indicates to us he's not doing a good job for his customers. And then we also have your traditional star rating that everybody's familiar with. These contractors don't work for us, but it's GreenPal's job to make sure that the experience is delightful on both sides of the transaction. In the same sense that, if you booked an Airbnb and you showed up and the bed wasn't made and the carpet was filthy and the bathroom was nasty, you're not mad at the person who owns the Airbnb. You're mad at Airbnb, even though Airbnb doesn't own that property.
Yeah,
it's the same thing for us.
It's interesting you said you rolled it out area by area. So there must be, I guess, then the customers that came onto your app would, I guess, pick a location. If that didn't come up, then obviously the service wasn't available in that area. Is that how it worked? Or
yeah, and that's one of the hard things about building a system like this, is saying no and not being able to help everybody, because we spent 3 years just in Nashville, Tennessee, where we live, getting the product to work well. And, that's 1% of the United States, maybe 2%. And we had to say no to everybody else who was signing up all over the place. And until we could figure out how to make more people happy, 98% of the people use it are happy versus when we first started, it might've been 10%. And getting that to a good point, there was no reason to scale it. And so as you kind of nail the experience and then scale it was the approach we took. And we had to say no to a lot of people for a long period of time. And we would refer them to other services. It's like, you might try Angie's List, you might try Thumbtack, you might try Home Advisor. Those weren't like end-to-end experiences like GreenPal, but at least we could give them something. Now we're nationwide in the United States, but for a long time we said no to a lot of people.
Yeah. So just going back to the supplier, then you're kind of doing almost like a desktop exercise at first, because anybody can set up a lawnmower business, I guess. But so you need to make sure that their credentials are good. They've got the right equipment. They're going to come, and give you the right service. And then you had the physical time when you went in there and check them out, I guess is what you're saying. Somebody from your organization would go and do that. And then you get the third evaluation was from your actual customers and the feedback they were giving you. So
that's right. And then as time goes on, our app is kind of a coach in their pocket. Getting them to understand, okay, you got to show up on time. You got to ask your customers for reviews. You got to ask your customers for ongoing services. You got to make sure they're happy. You got to be proactive. You got to follow up. You got to quote these additional services. You got to make sure that you take good pictures of the property when you're done. Like all of the things that go into being a good lawn mowing service, we teach these guys and gals how to do it. And Airbnb does this for hosts. They teach them how to be boutique hotel owners. We do the same thing for lawn care operators.
Right. So now let me just try to get this in my head now. So let's say I have used your app. I found a fantastic guy who does some great work for me. I'm really pleased. Now I assume they're reliant on that customer using the app to rebook the service. But what's stopping that person going straight to the contractor and say, hey, Joe, as the example you said earlier on, can you come back next week? How do you stop it not going through the app?
It doesn't, in our case, happen very often for a couple of reasons. One, we take a pretty small transactional fee. So it's not like we take 40% or something like that. So there's not a whole lot of economic incentive for either side to do it the old way. It's kind of like if you were going to the airport and you ordered an Uber and the driver turned around, or you tapped the driver on the shoulder, said, hey, would you mind stopping maybe 200 meters short and let me out, and I'll just pay you cash and we can both save the $2. Would that be cool? Like that's silly. We're not like that good, but we're pretty close. Once you've been like ghosted by your lawn guy and your grass is 5 feet tall, you get on GreenPal, you order up a lawn mowing service, they come out and do it. And then you just pay them. You don't have to like give them cash or haggle over the price or Venmo somebody some address somewhere. You literally just push a button and it happened. As a consumer, once you experience that, you don't want to do it the old way. As a contractor, once you've jumped onto the GreenPal platform, you now have all the customers you need. You're getting paid within 24 hours, which is a big part of like a pain point for contractors. Usually the lawn guy, that bill gets kind of like pushed under the other bills. It's the last to get paid. Well, with GreenPal, he gets paid quickly. He doesn't have accounts receivable. And then also everything's organized in one place. They no longer want to do it the old way. Now, out of 1,000 transactions, maybe one or two may get lost or less than 10, but it's very, very small.
Yeah. So I guess the customer has that comfort, the reliability that there is somebody they could go to if things don't work out well. If they go on their own, they're on their own, basically, aren't they?
Yeah, that's the other thing too. If the person you hire on GreenPal, maybe you didn't like them, maybe they weren't a good fit, maybe they didn't blow off the back patio, maybe, whatever, you can very easily hire somebody else, which that's a nice thing too. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 swings at the plate to get somebody who's a good fit for your yard. These lawn care services are not like fungible commodities like Uber drivers. We're in the matchmaking business, almost like Tinder is in a way. Like we're literally matching 1,000 different variables to 1,000 different variables and helping people find the good fits a lot quicker than what people do in the ordinary way.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things I'm quite interested to understand is, and I can get this through from your pace of your responses and your passion here, is understanding your mindset from going from one business ownership, which is physical, to a digital service. How did your mind need to change the way it processed things? It sounds like you're very ordered, structured. You talk a lot about processes and procedures and things like that. Did you find you had to change the way you thought about business when you went from physical to digital?
Great question. A lot of things are the same and a lot of things are very vastly different. So a lot of fundamentals around business, customer service, delighting customers, being proactive with how you deal with situations and issues, just keeping things organized, good, solid bookkeeping, good branding, good marketing, all these things that I learned in my first business, getting it to 8 figures, carried right over into the second business, good leadership, good management, all of these things. But then a lot of things are different. There's a big difference between building a traditional blue collar style business like what I had versus inventing something brand new from scratch that did not exist. And trying to figure that out as I went along was a very different journey than what I had done the first time. So that was hard. And so the main thing I think I learned in the second go around was that I can learn pretty much the 80-20 of almost anything. So I became a decent engineer. I became a decent marketer, a decent SEO analyst, a decent copywriter. I became pretty good at user interface design. And I had none of these skills a year or two prior to that. And the big unlock there was to not believe your own BS, to really be able to understand that if you're going to make it in business, you're going to have to learn a lot of different things, and that you can pretty much learn the 80-20 of anything, particularly these days, now that we have YouTube University and access to all this stuff. And so that was a big like change in the way I saw problems and saw thinking was, no, just grit your teeth, get in there, put in the work, understand the dynamics of the problem, and get people around you that understand it better than you. Don't delegate to them not knowing how to do any of it, because that won't work. You got to get in there and understand how some of it works before you can delegate. That was the main change in my thinking from the first traditional business to the second digital business. Yeah.
So the next phase in GreenPal, what's your plan for the next 5 years?
I'm not a big 5-year detailed plan kind of guy. I kind of like to put out big goals and do what we got to do on a daily basis. But the 5 years looks like 1 million users and 100 million in revenue. That's where we got to get to for us to be into the same kind of, I guess you could say, conversation as an Uber, Instacart, DoorDash, Postmates, Lyft, Deliveroo in Europe. It's like we want to be in the same conversation as these household names that are the default way that people do these tasks. GreenPal needs to be in the same set for lawn care. And so that's 5 years, maybe less, maybe 4 years, 100 million active users.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, I'll ask you one more question, if I may, but I notice the time is getting very tight now. So how do people find out more about you, your business, and follow about, your journey?
Yeah, anybody in the United States, soon to be Canada and UK, that wants to try out GreenPal, that doesn't, want to waste time mowing your yard, just download GreenPal in the App Store or Play Store. And then anybody wants to hit me up, Instagram is the best place to get me. Bryan M. Clayton, just drop me a DM there.
Fantastic. So my last question, a little bit of a selfish one for my son, really. So for those young people, such as my son, looking to succeed as an entrepreneur, what advice would you give them to avoid making some of the mistakes you had to deal with and overcome in your journey?
Well, the best thing you can do is learn from other people's mistakes. So these days is literally laying out your week every single week of on the business, in the business, on yourself. And the place where we always cut corners is the on ourself part. So really try to learn from the roadmap other people have laid out, and try to figure out ways that you can avoid mistakes that they've made, so you don't have to make them yourself. So you can condense a 10-year journey into 2 maybe. And then the other thing I'll say is as a business owner, in 5 years from today, you will arrive. It's just the question is where, and the business can be the answer to that question. It can really be the thing that takes you places in life that you never would have been able to go to if you really pour your soul into the business. So that's the big picture thing, and the small tactical thing is think of your life as a movie, and the business could be the storyline to that movie, and just pour your soul into it, because it worked for me.
Brilliant. That's great advice, and I'll certainly pass it on. So that's brilliant. Thanks very much for quite an intense but fascinating story of how you pivoted, changed, developed, and become such a success. So thank you for joining us today, Bryan.
Thanks, Dave. I enjoyed it.
Great. Cheers, then. So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it, and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.